With a truck and some dynamite, Hezbollah had won another victory in Khomeini's holy war. Despite the chaos in Beirut in 1985, the airport was still operating, providing hijackers with easy access to the international network. A spate of hijackings culminated in the bizarre 17-day drama of TWA Flight 847, played out before the world's media on the tarmac of Beirut Airport. Shiite militiamen of Amal strolled on the runway, ostensibly policing the airport, yet the Hezbollah hijackers were allowed to do as they pleased. Nabi Berri, Amal's leader, negotiated for them. In return for the release of the 44 hostages, they demanded the freedom of Shiite prisoners taken by the Israelis in the Lebanon. Nabi Berri professed disapproval of Hezbollah's method, but he made no secret of his support for their cause.
Save those people, release your innocent people from your jail. This problem, it will be finished in 24 hours.
American warships appeared off the coast, suggesting a rescue attempt. But the hijackers had already prepared for that.
Captain Drake, do you have any idea what's happened to the passengers on the aircraft?
No, except we've been told that they've been taken to a safe place, that they're comfortable and being well taken care of.
Hezbollah and Amal had cooperated, taking the hostages from the plane at night. They had hidden them in the city in different locations, effectively ruling out any military solutions. With all eyes on Beirut, Hezbollah took full advantage of the publicity. At one point, the two original hijackers appeared to a tumultuous welcome from their supporters. Behind the scenes, American pressure was mounting, and the Israelis began releasing their Shiite prisoners in batches. Despite denials by all parties, it was obvious a deal had been done. Hezbollah had achieved another victory. Some of the same hijackers were in action again. In 1988, the seizure of a Kuwaiti 747 showed how much they'd learned by experience. After diverting the plane to Iran, a second team of hijackers came on board carrying heavy weapons and explosives. Throughout, they operated like a highly trained special forces squad. No one doubted their seriousness when they callously dumped the body of their first victim on the Larnaca runway. The choice of a Kuwaiti plane was no accident. Kuwait City had been an early target for Khomeini's web of terror. In 1983, a series of bombings shook the city, the work of Dawa, an Iraqi Shiite group linked to both the Khomeini regime and Hezbollah. 17 of them were imprisoned, and the Kuwaiti government refused all demands for their release. Even with Kuwaiti royal hostages, these hijackers failed to free them, and after 16 days they gave up in return for safe passage. Professional to the last, they wiped their fingerprints from the plane before leaving. The seizure of hostages has been Hezbollah's most callous and yet most profitable tactic. Governments have found it difficult to resist popular demand for negotiation with kidnappers when faced with the haunting images of the captives on video. In return for Hezbollah's prisoners in the Lebanon, Iran has received both money and weapons. The resolve of different countries was shaken when it was revealed that despite his rhetoric, the American president had himself bowed to pressure.
A few months ago, I told the American people I did not trade arms for hostages. My heart and my best intentions still tell me that's true, but the facts and the evidence tell me it is not.
The death of Ayatollah Khomeini in 1989 has taken some of the fervor out of the Islamic Revolution. But in Beirut, Hezbollah still holds hostages, their suffering prolonged by each new crisis in the Middle East. Freedom of movement and technological change have in many ways made the terrorists' role easier over the last 2 decades and increased the scale of destruction they can achieve. Guarding against each new innovation they introduce is a battle the security forces can never really win. The frequent use of the Czech explosive Semtex during the 80s is just one example. Without any trace elements, it passes through the standard bomb detectors. The fate of Pan Am Flight 103, which exploded, then crashed on the Scottish town of Lockerbie in 1988, was a disastrous example of the terrible power of even a small charge. In actively combating terrorism, however, a lot has been learned. The Israeli rescue of hostages from Entebbe in 1976 was an early example of what a skilled elite force can achieve. In an operation that took only 36 minutes on the ground, the crucial moment was the seizure of the room where the hostages were held, as the Israeli Chief of Staff explained.
The battle inside the building did not take more than 1 minute, something like 45 seconds, and in that time our people succeeded to kill 4 of the terrorists who were inside that room.
Most countries have now developed counter-terrorist teams, and the British Special Air Service action at the Iranian embassy in London in 1980 showed how effective they can be. After a 6-day siege and the death of 2 hostages, the SAS used listening devices in the chimneys to locate the terrorists, then abseiled from the roof, breaking into the building at different points. They hurled stun grenades into the building, then swept it to a preconceived plan to devastating effect. 5 of the 6 terrorists were killed. There are other ways of fighting terrorism, as the Americans showed in 1985, when they launched fighters to force down the plane carrying the Achille Lauro hijackers. It landed at a NATO base in Sicily. Delta Force commandos had flown in to seize them for trial in the USA. The Italian government asserted its right to imprison them there. It was only discovered later that Abu Abbas, the leader of the PLF, had been on board the plane and had been allowed to leave. President Reagan underlined the new American policy.
Soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines sent a message to terrorists everywhere. A message: you can run, but you can't hide.
Today, as the multinational forces line up against Iraq, terrorist tactics are in use again, this time as an additional arm of warfare. Palestinians like Abu Abbas, now in Iraq, have threatened to use their own special skills if it comes to war.
If America stops Iraqi civilian planes in order to check them as part of the air blockade, we will also stop American planes. If America shoots down an Iraqi airliner, we will bring down an American airliner.
And Saddam Hussein is ready to use his civilian hostages as a human shield if war breaks out.